Surprise! Guess what? If you see me and you hear my voice, then you know it's Sunday and it's 5 o'clock and that this is the ANTiSEEN fan page and that I am Malcolm Tent and I'm coming at you live via the wonders of my brand new webcam. What do you guys think of that? After the last 6 weeks or so watching me look like this and, being completely spasmodic and robotic and like a member of Kraftwerk, all of a sudden I'm flowing and I'm smooth and I'm looking good and I'm sounding good, baby. Feels good. It's good to be me. Good to be you. Glad to see everybody tuning in and turning on and dropping out of your minds here live on the ANTiSEEN Facebook page. Very festive, very good to have everybody here. Hello, Zach and Christian and Jeff and Stefan and Zach and Brian and all you guys. Good to have you here. Wasn't too sure if I was going to do a broadcast today because I thought maybe I was sort of out of ideas and things to talk about relating to the almighty ANTiSEEN, but then I realized I got more. I got plenty more. One thing I haven't talked about yet is the instrument that I play in the almighty ANTiSEEN, which is the bass guitar. One of these right here. Listen to that. Yeah, you can hear stuff happening already. The bass guitar. One of these things. Never really talked about it, so today we're going to talk about it a little bit. The Thunder Lumber. The 4-string weapon of musical destruction. And how I relate to it, and how it relates to me, and how the whole thing relates to the almighty ANTiSEEN. Yeah. So, might as well start at the very beginning. My name is Malcolm Tent. I was born in Columbia, South Carolina in 1964. Was raised in Florida, and moved to the state of Connecticut in 1986, where I have been ever since. I've known ANTiSEEN since 1984. I've been a friend and a fan ever since, and now I'm actually a member. And this came about through one fateful text message exchange when Jeff Clayton asked if I wanted to play bass for ANTiSEEN, and I said, yes, I do. And the question is, well, why would Jeff Clayton ask little old me if I wanted to play bass for ANTiSEEN? Why would he ask anybody that question? It seems like kind of a random thing to do. You don't just pick up your phone and think, I'm going to text a total stranger and ask them if they want to play bass for ANTiSEEN. No. For some reason, the unimpeachable president for life, Jeff Clayton, deliberately contacted me and asked me that one very specific question. And yes, he did it for a reason. A definite reason. The reason being that I am a bass player. And I have always thought of myself as, a bass player. When it comes to being a musician, to me, bass is the place. It is my number one choice. It is my absolutely preferred weapon when it comes to leveling audiences all across the world with sonic booms and explosive, thundering sounds coming out of a gigantic amplifier, all created by the bass. And one might ask, well, how'd you get to that way, old man? How did you decide that you were a bass player? Well, it's interesting. It goes back, as so many things do, to when I was just a wee little itty-bitty lad. Probably, I must have been maybe 2 or 3 years old. Probably 2 or 3 years old, max. I remember very clearly that my father, for some reason, had a bass guitar. And that this bass guitar was always propped up against the family stereo. And the family stereo was one of those great big old console jobs, like a huge giant wooden cabinet. It was made to look like a piece of furniture. Had a couple of speakers on either side behind a grill. And you opened up the lid. And remember, I was 2 years old. So in my perspective, this thing was about that big. So you had these 2 speakers there. And you could stand up to it and open up the lid and reach over and peer down, and there was a record player inside of it. and like an FM, AM radio on the side, and you could look in and watch the record turn around and around and around. And I remember clearly that the old man's bass was always propped up against this great big console stereo. And I don't actually ever remember him playing it. I have no memories of him ever playing it. Although I do remember that he had a sort of translucent blue pick for it. I remember that pick, and I remember that bass. And I remember that bass being bigger than I was. And I remember the pick guard on it. It was a Fender knockoff of some sort. And that thing was just always around the house. And so it was just this thing that was there. I always knew it was there. I didn't know really what it was. As time went on and I discovered rock and roll, and you can hear that story if you go onto my personal page, the Malcolm Tent page. I was on last Wednesday talking about records that most people hate but that I love. And the number one and most crucial entry was Live Album by Grand Funk Railroad, which I acquired when I was 7 years old. And the bass guitar sound is one of the things that I zeroed in on immediately when I heard Grand Funk Live Album, because there's no bass sound like any other on the planet than what you'll hear on that album. And it literally resonated with me, although I didn't know what it was at the time. Like even a little bit later when I got into Kiss, and I had my copy of Kiss Alive, and it's got the pictures of the guys on the cover, I didn't know the difference between a guitar and a bass guitar. I always assumed that Gene Simmons was the lead guitarist because he was the most visible guy, the one with the highest profile and the biggest public image. Therefore, he must be the lead guitarist. I didn't even know what a bass was, even though you can see him clearly playing it on the front cover of Kiss Alive. So I didn't know what it was, but it was somehow speaking to me in spite of my complete and utter ignorance on the subject. Excuse me for 1 second. There's a lot of pollen in the air today in Connecticut. The air smells sweet, but all that pollen is coagulating right there in my larynx, so you got to bear with me a little bit. We're going to fast forward a little bit past Grand Funk Live Album, past Kiss Alive, into when I was in the 10th grade, and it came time to form my first ever high school band, which wasn't even my idea. It was the idea of my friend Rick, who later became the lead singer of Broken Talent. He wanted to put together a punk rock band to be in the high school talent show, which was called the Freaky Funky Follies. Excuse me. Excuse me again. So, okay, let's form a band. Who can do what? Well, he was going to be the singer. He decided it was his idea, so he was going to be the guy up front and do the lead vocalizing, lead singing. And, well, what did I have? There's this bass guitar propped up against the console. I'll play that. And that was it. That was literally how it began. It just happened to be the instrument that was there at hand at the time. And it also turned out that it was just easy enough. I mean, since it was really big and kind of easy to get a grip on, and it only had 4 strings, it was just easy enough to be able to plunk out. Oh, wait, that's not it. Oh, no, that's not it. No, that's not it. It was easy enough to plunk out on 4 strings God Save the Queen eventually. I was somehow able to eventually figure out how to play God Save the Queen by the Sex Pistols. And that's the song that we tried to do at the high school talent show. And because of that, just because of the pure circumstance of it being in the house and it being easy enough to eventually figure out how to play God Save the Queen by the Sex Pistols, that was it. I was a bass player. From that moment on, that's the way it went. And so when this miserable little high school aggregation eventually evolved into Broken Talent, which was my first band in South Florida, the group that did My God Can Beat Up Your God and all that, the bass came with me. I was, by default, automatically the bass player. And so that's just how I started doing it. And just by the process of continually playing and continually trying to write songs and just experimenting and, dicking around with this thing, I somehow figured out how to write a song, how to play a song, and how to, over much trial and error, somehow get better at it. And I must state, I've never had an actual formal lesson in my life. I've never gone to a lesson. I've had people show me things. I've had a lot of people show me things. But I've never actually sat down with a guitar teacher who said, okay, well, this is the pentatonic minor scale, and, well, play along with the Santana record. That's how you'll learn how to play bass, because Santana's got the best bass lines. And here, take this music book and, learn how to read Mel Bay music theory. None of that. I never, ever once had a lesson. It was all just things that people showed me here and there over time. And also just sitting around like what I'm doing now, just picking it up and just plucking at it and plunking away and fiddling around until something came out. Until something came out that sounded good. And then if it sounded good, trying to remember it and turning it into a song and making it into something. So it's been nothing but that. Nothing but literally trial and error and taking a couple of things that people have shown me and applying them and using my own imagination with all that stuff. Now, South Florida had a couple of really good bands. I'm not going to say mine was one of them. I would hardly ever make that claim. It's a very bold claim to make. But my first actual, I'm going to say, influence on the bass guitar was this woman named Libby Bentley. She was the bass player for this group called Morbid Opera. Morbid Opera were great. They were a couple of years older than we were. They were much more debauched than we were. They could play a lot better than we could. They were one of those bands who, at least in my mind, we always kind of aspired to be. I always wanted to be as good musicians as the Gay Cowboys in Bondage, they were my favorite South Florida punk band. The Gay Cowboys, they were awesome. They had this total devil may care, who gives a fuck attitude, but they could really, really play. They were really, really funny, really good at what they did, and I always, in my mind, wanted to be as good as the Gay Cowboys in Bondage. And I also wanted to be as dangerous and menacing as Morbid Opera, because they had a really wicked sound. They were all about fuzz and distortion and psychedelics and total punk rock attitude, and really not G-A-F-ing. You know what that means in internet shorthand. I don't have to say it, Try to keep it clean here. I already slipped once, but I'm going to try to keep it clean from now on. It's a family show here. So Morbid Opera just had this real nasty sound to it that I love so much. And key to that was the fact that Libby Bentley played bass through some kind of distortion. And I'd never heard distortion, fuzz, what have you, on a bass before. And that kind of opened my eye and opened my ear and opened my mind to what a bass could sound like. It didn't have to be, some guy sitting there with his Santana licks going, there's more to it than that. A bass could sound like this. It could be really wicked, dangerous, and evil. That's the way I wanted it. And Libby Bentley kind of pointed the way to that. So then you fast forward a couple more years to when I emigrated to Connecticut, and I crossed paths with another bass player who was also very, very influential on the way I saw things. Not influential in the way that I wanted to copy him, but influential in the way that he showed me the way that something could be done. And it totally actualized what I already heard. This guy's name was Tom Monahan, and he played bass in a group called Monsterland. And Monsterland, back in the early 90s, were like the Danbury alt-rock band that was going to make it, but, never quite did. We've heard that story many, many times. But Tom Monahan was the first guy I ever saw who played chords on the bass. And I think he used some fuzz, too. He must have used fuzz. because the way he played chords just sounded really, really good. And I realized that I could do that too. And chords sounded good, and so did octaves. That sounds good, man. That sounds real good. So between Libby Bentley showing me that a bass could be played with distortion and Tom Monahan demonstrating that you could use chords, I kind of got the foundation of my entire style. It's all based on that. Chords, distortion, lots of trial and error, and just picking up bits and pieces from people here and there, playing along with Ramones records, playing along with Black Sabbath records, playing along with Gary Newman records. Gary Newman's bass lines are awesome. Very simple, repetitious, very to the point. And you can really learn a lot from playing along with something like that. And just sticking at it, sticking with it, and loving it, because I love the sound of the bass. I love the feel of the bass. The bass feels good. It's heavy. It's I don't know, it's just heavy. And that resonates with me. You know, I of course have to mention, you know, I do my solo acoustic punk rock guitar thing. I tour all over the world with it. I've played drums in bands. I play electric guitar with They Hate Us. I love it all, but bass is really what floats my boat. And so I've always stuck with it. Taking all the lessons I learned, I applied it to some of the bands that I've been in over the years. And the first one that was kind of crucial, and I'm going to take 1 second here to look over here and make sure that the stream is still happening. I'm seeing a little bit of, there we go. I'm seeing a little bit of feedback here, but you never can tell with the internet if it's actually on and happening. And I'll mention too, I'm going to stick around on the internet for a little while after this thing is done. If anybody wants to hang out and talk and ask questions, I'll answer questions. I can't do it live, but I can be here for you guys. The first band I was in Connecticut of consequence was a band called Bunny Brains. Bunny Brains was all improv. It was noisy. It was chaotic. It was mayhem. I was primarily the bass player, and that's where I put into practice this ability I have to just make stuff up on the spot. To sort of pluck the melodies out of the air. And so I did that for a long time, and I got to play with lots of distortion and lots of chording and lots of weird, messed up, noisy caca-doo-doo. Bunny Brains opened up for ANTiSEEN in New Haven, Connecticut in 1991, I think it was. So they had seen me do my thing in the Bunny Brains. Obviously, Broken Talent had shared the stage with ANTiSEEN in the early 80s, 1984, and again in 1985. So my path as a bass player had already crossed ANTiSEEN's path. You know, so between Broken Talent, Bunny Brains, records I was on, us just being friends and hanging out. Oh, I sort of knew this guy's a bass player. And he's a lifer, and he's not going anywhere. And he's got a mean, nasty, distorted sound. Put that in the memory bank. Put that in the file cabinet. So Bunny Brains, yeah, eventually evolved into Ultra Bunny. Slightly different personnel. It was just me and Bobby Bunny who formed the Bunny Brains, and a rotating cast of drummers. Same concept, same deal. All improv, all distorted. Lots of big chords and lots of pure effing noise. And I will, of course, mention that Ultra Bunny do have an album out. This is called Unsafe at Any Age / Volume Merchants. Where am I? Ah, that's me, right there. Not playing a bass, but actually I'm playing a bass with 2 drumsticks. And that is what we do to audiences. That's a real-life, honest-to-God, unstaged, unposed picture of an audience at an Ultra Bunny concert. Yes, totally true. And so that's the kind of background I was coming from, which might have helped plow the field for me to be the bass player for ANTiSEEN at some point. Now, I mentioned earlier about how we're all conscious of each other and aware of each other and sort of fellow travelers. I was always a huge fan of ANTiSEEN. And I've always zeroed in on their bass playing, you know. You've obviously got the really distinctive sound of Joe Young's gigantic electric razor guitar, which is no bass whatsoever, nothing but high end. And then whatever bizarre combination of pedals and amps he would use to get that sound that just makes you go, I love this, this is great, it's killing me, I love it. I actually got headaches listening to Joe Young's guitar sound. Fantastic, fantastic. The thing is, you need something on the sonic palette to complement that, to offset that. And that's what the ANTiSEEN bass players have always done. And in my mind, and here's where we get into opinion territory, it's just the way I look at it. In my mind, and the way that I approach it when I play bass with ANTiSEEN, the entire ANTiSEEN bass sound is founded on two dudes. As far as I'm concerned, ANTiSEEN's bass sound was created by two dudes. The first was Marlon Cherry, who played bass on the NC Royalty EP. Marlon Cherry was one hell of a musician, still is. Top shelf musician, awesome, highly skilled player. And what he brought to the table as far as ANTiSEEN bass playing was melody. Like a pure melodic sense of playing and a very fluid, very smooth style of playing. Just a really great combination of skill and technique and tone and everything. And he could play these really smooth melodic bass lines without being obnoxious and overbearing. It's like he found that middle ground between doing the ANTiSEEN sort of punk rock thing and jazzing it up and spicing it up. Never stepping on the song, but always complementing it. And always putting in these extra notes that totally underpinned what Joe Young was playing on the guitar. Excuse me. So Marlon Cherry introduced that complete element of melody to the ANTiSEEN bass lines. The next guy, who in my opinion, the way I see it and the way I play it and feel it, who defined the ANTiSEEN bass sound was Thom O'Keefe, or Thom O'Keefe as I always knew him. Thom, man, the first few times I saw him play bass with ANTiSEEN was quite the eye-opener. He had this great big old Rickenbacker that he played with 3 strings on it, and he played with a thumb pick, like a thumb banjo pick. But he didn't like just sit there, you know, doing the whole thing that you see a lot of bass players doing with his thumb, you know. Nope, that wasn't it. He had this thumb pick on and he was going, "Arr!" The bottom string totally missing, distortion. Playing ANTiSEEN songs and doing the whole swoop. Listen to that, isn't that great? I love that. So, playing a song like Star Whore. The swoop. First time I ever really heard the swoop was from Thom O'Keefe. So he had the swoop, he had the distortion, and he had that attitude. And so in my mind, you couple all of that with Marlon Cherry's melodic sense, and you've got the ANTiSEEN bass sound. And so whenever I go on stage and play bass with ANTiSEEN, it's a hybrid of those two styles that I'm trying to emulate. And it works for me because it feels great. I mean, it's just so much fun to play, you know. It's just the way I like it. It's fast, it's accurate, but there's still lots of room for chaos and lots of room for mayhem and lots of room for complete insanity. And ANTiSEEN songs are not, they're really not easy to play, you know. I've always likened ANTiSEEN music to being similar to Motown music. When you hear a Motown song, it's easy to listen to. It sounds good, everything flows, everything makes sense, everything fits together perfectly. But if you actually sit down and try to play along with a Motown song, nothing really goes where you think it's going to go, and nothing actually fits together the way you think it's going to fit together, and you think the song's going to move in one direction, but it goes somewhere else. That's why Motown is so classic. That's why Motown music, 50, 60 years on, is still, classic, still listenable. ANTiSEEN songs are the same way. They don't always go where you think they're going to go, and a lot of times they've got little swerves and left-hand turns and dips and ducks and swoops and, dives. And you got to be on top of them. You have to really be alert in order to catch them all. So it's a lot of fun playing these songs and getting to not only emulate the style, that Marlon Cherry, Thom O'Keefe hybrid, but to, maybe put my own little bit of thumbprint smudginess all over it. So the bass I've been showing you now is not the bass that I actually play in ANTiSEEN. This is my rehearsal bass. This is a, standard Fender Precision. I've had this thing for 20-something years. It's a good bass. It's got a really good sound. It is the bass that I use with Ultra Bunny. Yes, I use the Fender Precision bass with Ultra Bunny. I don't use it with ANTiSEEN. The reason being that this was always my number one go-to bass for years and years and years. I got it for Christmas in 1991 or 92, somewhere around then. Fell in love with it, used it forever. When it came time to be in ANTiSEEN, when I got the call to be ANTiSEEN's bass player, I just felt like doing something different. I wanted to change things up a little bit. I also wanted to indulge in my penchant for making a bit of a spectacle of myself. So I remembered my original bass that had been in storage for many, many years since I got the Fender P bass, actually. When I got the Fender P bass for Christmas in 1990 whatever, I took my original bass, the bass I bought in 1985, the first actual real bass I ever bought with my own money, for $125 off the rack at Music Makers in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. And this thing sat there forever. Now you might look at this and say, what the hell is that? What on earth is that? Oh, I see, it's an MT. Well, I made it an MT, but it's not an MT. This is something else entirely. I just love the way that sounds. Yeah, I bought this in 1985 at Music Makers in Fort Lauderdale. It had been hanging on the rack for weeks and weeks and weeks. Nobody wanted it. It cost $125. It was a PV T20 bass. Complete with hard case and a couple of free guitar picks for $125. I bought it, fell in love with it. It was Broken Talent's bass from 1985 until we broke up about 6 months later. And then I used it in the King Hatreds, which was my first Connecticut band, and the early days of the Bunny Brains. Then I got the P bass and retired it. So when it came time to join ANTiSEEN, I remembered the old T20, which had been in storage for years and years and years. And it had come out once since I'd retired it, because I got a gig with a black metal band. Yes, a black metal band. Name of the black metal band, Profanatica. Yes, Profanatica. Arguably America's first ever black metal band. Scholars can debate that. As far as I'm concerned, they were the first black metal band in the US of A, and they were from the next town over in Brewster, New York. So I got the gig to play with them, which was awesome. And what they wanted to do was sort of a reaction against the standard black metal look. They said, look, corpse paint is passé. We're not going to do that. We're going to go all black instead. We're just going to be the blackest souls in rock and roll. So everything's got to be black. I thought, all right, we can do that. We can take this Fender, PVT-20 bass and make it black. So I wrapped the whole thing up in electrical tape and did a little bit of spot patching with duct tape and, you know, put the tape all over the neck and the headstock. Yes, my soul was black. The metal was black. Apparently I was totally invisible on stage. You couldn't even see me. Love it. And played the gig with Profanatica. Put the T20 back in storage and then got the call for ANTiSEEN. Dragged it out. Plugged it in and realized very quickly that it had a little more bite sonically than the P bass did. I don't know what the heck kind of pickup that is. Or maybe some of you gearheads out there, you tech heads, can tell me. I see that Sir Barry's tuned in. Sir Barry, do you know what kind of a pickup that is? Does anybody know what kind of a pickup that is? I have no idea. But it's got a lot of punch. It's got a lot of bite. It's got a real naturally nasty, mean sound to it. Perfect for the almighty ANTiSEEN. So decided this was going to be the bass because it looked the most interesting and it sounded the best. Woo! It's getting exciting just thinking about it. Hold on for 1 second, man. I got a drink. All right. So sound is not made just by bass alone. Sound is made with an entire effects chain, an entire sonic chain that goes from bass to effects to the amp. Everything makes the sound. So we got the T20, the PVT-20, heavily gimmicked with the Thunderbolt strap. That's going to be the ANTiSEEN stage bass. Well, what am I going to play through? Because I mentioned before, Thom O'Keefe had the idea that I loved, which is distortion and fuzz. So what are we going to use for distortion and fuzz? Well, I already had a whole great big bag of tricks. Because with Ultra Bunny, in order to make people react like that, I had all kinds of stuff. I had, 3 distortion pedals, a Zoom bass effects pedal, a wah-wah pedal, a looper, all kinds of stuff. And so not knowing exactly how the sound was going to coalesce with ANTiSEEN, oh, pardon me for 1 second, my cat, you guys can't see this, and you might be very happy you can't see this, but Harry the cat, who is my cat, has caught a mouse, and he is currently 6 feet away from me, eating it. So if you hear a little meow, meow, and the sound of that's my cat eating a mouse. And it's very distracting, so I'm going to close the door. Yeah, this is live video right here, kids. Oh my God. You know how distracting it is to have a cat eating a mouse 3 feet away from you? Jesus Louises. Anyway, first ANTiSEEN bass session I had, first rehearsal with ANTiSEEN, I just brought the whole kit and caboodle, all the distortion pedals, the looper, the Zoom bass effects pedal, the wah-wah pedal, and I was pretty confident that that stuff wasn't all going to fly, because, just cuz. You can't walk into a band situation and say, hey guys, let's do this! You have to be, you're aware of the fact that you're in a pre-existing band. You got to play by the rules of the band. But at the same time, you want to try to bring things to the table that can add to the sound, that can complement the overall sound. You want to add something to the sound of the band without stepping all over it. Because if you step all over it, you're out. Duh! So I bring in all this stuff, and I plug it in, and I thought I saw maybe 1 or 2 raised eyebrows, but they let me do it. No grief. No grief from the new bosses. I forget what song we were playing. It might have been Masters of the Sky. But at one point I thought, boy, some wah would sound really good. Why don't I step on this wah-wah pedal? And the wah, of course, goes And I remember distinctly Jeff Clayton looking over at Mad Brother Ward with this sort of like, ugh, expression on his face. And he seemed kind of amused by it, but somehow I knew I was able to catch the social cue that the wah pedal wasn't going to make it. So that was the one and only time that the wah-wah got exercised in an ANTiSEEN context. So from there, it just seemed very simple and very fundamental that we were going to go to the basics, to the essentials, to what really worked, to what was going to help further that Marlon Cherry crossed with Thom O'Keefe sound. So what it ended up being was this. Very simple little array. Very, very no nonsense. We've got your standard basic Behringer turbo overdrive. You've probably seen this on every stage, everywhere in the universe. The reason being, this is a good pedal. This is a real good pedal. I mean, if you want an awesome crunch, you really can't go wrong with the Behringer. A cheap knockoff of the Behringer, which actually has some different sonic properties to it. It doesn't sound exactly like a Behringer. The two are a little bit different. I usually will use either one or another, but sometimes when a song requires a little bit of extra punch, I'll crank them both up. And that's when the hair blows back on your scalp. And a loop pedal. Yes, the loop pedal's an awful lot of fun. I love the loop pedal. The loop pedal actually has some ANTiSEEN personalities you might recognize. Let's see what we got here on this channel. See, this happens on stage sometimes. Let's hear this. Yep, this happens on stage sometimes. I think I just erased the loop I was trying to play for you.
Sit tight and listen keenly while I play for you a brand new musical biscuit.
Yeah, recognize that? That's on the loop pedal. How about this one? Here's a golden oldie y'all might know. You've been warned. Don't say that the immortal Jack Starr did not warn you. Jack Starr is immortal. He lives on right there in that pedal. The looper is also really handy dandy for when we do the Fuck All Y'all Destructo finale. I like to just make a whole bunch of, well, I thought I was going to keep it clean, but I'm not going to keep it clean anymore. Just a bunch of fucking goddamn noise at the end and loop it. No, that ain't it. Shh. How about this? You should hear that at about 111 decibels. That's really something. That's where the looper pedal comes very much in handy. So, let's say you've got here the heavily gimmicked PVT-20. And I should mention another very important component of the bass sound is the Malcolm Tent guitar pick. This is very, very important. Malcolm Tent rocked with this pick. And after today, it's going to be true. So let's say for Star Whore, just because I happen to have that one close at hand, we use one overdrive